Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Shift the Podcast. My guest today is Robert Snow, PT. He's a physical therapist, and we dive into all sorts of topics from pain, from marriage, from parenting, being a father. He's got some great insight. He's been married for almost 30 years to his wife, who's an NLP practitioner. So lots of different topics that we engage in today, and it's a really great conversation. Unfortunately, we had some technical difficulties in the middle, so you might see some jumps back and forth. And this is the second time we've had this conversation because I actually interviewed Robert for season 1, and the whole episode got deleted. I'm not sure where it went. I lost about a month's worth of files, so I had to redo some stuff. And this is just the raw, vulnerable part of being a new podcaster and learning how to back up and archive and do all the things you got to do. So hopefully you enjoy the conversation. It's about an hour and a half long, so feel free to break it up into a couple of days because I know not everybody has the time to sit and listen for such a long time. But I promise you that if you do get through the whole thing, the content is great, and there's a lot of great insights and a lot of great nuggets. So thanks for being here. Enjoy the interview.
Perfect. All right. So first of all, thank you for coming back and doing this again, since I'm a idiot and lost.
Stuff happens, dude. We get to chat again. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I lost like a month's worth of files. I was like, no, wait, I don't understand. And multiple attempts to recover did not work. So you just get to be a part of season 2, which is awesome. But while we're doing that, I definitely want to talk I want to chat about marriage. I want to chat about mindset. You shared a really great story with me before about pain and pain management and like the mind over matter type stuff. You don't have to share the story again, but I definitely want to talk about that. And then I kind of recently, I've sort of been going through this thing about like the world's falling apart, everything's going crazy. And I think it's really interesting, the dynamics and the ebb and flow and the conversations I have with people and the conversations I have with myself, because I feel like the conversations I've been having with myself the last 2 or 3 weeks are the same ones I had after 9/11. They're the same ones I had in 1992 when I was graduating high school and we were starting a war in the Middle East. Like, it's crazy to me, like as a kid, and I'm just sort of rambling, but I know that you're tracking with me. I feel like as a kid, like we look at things like they're so, like my oldest son right now was really struggling with what's happening in Afghanistan and some of the things that are going on in the Middle East. And it just really struck me like how little empathy I have for that scenario, because this is at least the third time that I've experienced this type of thing. And so it kind of caught me off guard, as like, okay, where's my empathy? Where's my, Christian faith? Where's my loving my fellow man? And then at some point it's like, also like, I can only control what I can control. And right now that's the 9 or 10 people that live in my house, and where that bubbles out. Right. And you got a few years on me, not much, but you got a few years on me. I'm wondering, like, just what are your thoughts on it? Like, how do you navigate all that and not?
That's a lot to unpack. I mean, you got a lot.
Like I said, I don't really have a question. I just have this, like, I'm gonna dump and we'll see where it goes from there.
Well, I wrote down pain and mindset just so that we don't forget that, because I think that given everything else you put out there, there's a couple different perspectives, right? Because we have our faith in our fellow man, and our faith in the things that we expect that, do we live as he lives? Do we, we're talking about Jesus. And then do we create that example? And then how does that represent to where we are? And I don't know, I mean, especially with what's going on like now, I mean, it's troubling. It's troubling to lose lives on both sides. Like, I mean, we can talk about the servicemen that were killed, and I'm just like really, we gotta, I mean, that was the whole reason we were supposed to get out of there, and now we're gonna have to go back. And I'm just like, I'm doing this thing with my head, like, that dad rub, like when your kid's like, hey, well, and actually I have a great story, right? And it'll show you the dad rub, like where my son's like, oh, I had a flat tire on your BMW that I borrowed to go my little baby. It was 2003. I had a flat tire on the freeway, so I drove it out the freeway, and I'm like, there's $300 rim. Like, you know, so it's that like we have to go back into Afghanistan now just to secure the people. When there's like, you know, and there's a whole, you know, there never was going to be a great time. Like we know that, and as much as, you know, as much as I try to, and I said it before, and Charlotte is actually reminding of it more, but as much as I try to remain curious when it comes to people's perspectives, including administrations, right? And I listen to, you know, I listen to the president talk about it, and I have to, you know, I have to put my, you know, my staunch whatever off to the side and listen to him. And he's like, there's no good way. Our job's not to prop the government up. And I'm like, I mean, yeah, we're there for 20 years. Like, when do we go out? There's no getting out, right? So how do we get out, right? And you know, the point to argue is, what was a better way, right? That's the only thing we're going to argue about, because everybody was saying it was time to go. But you know, it's just, I think what I'm curious is I wonder, well, I don't know. So I'll go off on one of Robert's rants that you've heard, and maybe you haven't heard it. Well, this will be good, because if you have, then great, and if you haven't, then you get it anyway. You know, I know that we're, you know, we sit out and we have these conversations, and we're unhappy for the most part. And this is the royal we, you know, we're relatively unhappy with what college students and 21-year-olds and whatever it is they're doing. It's like, I don't understand why they want to, you know, do the things that they're doing and their perspectives, and why they care so much, whether this and whether that. And so I was raised by a single parent. So my grandfather was really kind of, you know, involved to that extent with me in my life. And you know, I mean, he came from the Depression, right? I mean, he was of that area, and I'm still sort of old enough, young enough to remember some of those stories, right? I haven't heard it from grandparents and grandparents. We never experienced that, right? And you know, to me, and kind of the thing that was sort of drilled into my life in my head, like my role as a father, and sometimes we struggle with that, like, what is my role, right? Was that I was supposed to get a job. My highest and greatest purpose was to get a job and provide for my family. Like those two things, that's it, right? Like, as long as I did those two things, like, I'm set. Like I've sort of made it, which explains why it is that guys that lose their jobs and are able to provide for their families have such an emotional issue, right? Because it's supposed to be their thing, right? And even to the point where my son actually just helped him pack up his U-Haul. He and his wife are moving back to California. I don't know why, but I mean, you know, they're young, no kids, just the two of them, you know. And his wife got a job, and he's like, I'm in this weird spot. Like, I've always been the breadwinner. And I'm like, just enjoy it, dude. Embrace the fact that you guys are working together. Like, you're pulling together for the first time. Anyway, so back onto my soapbox about kids and the way they care so much. And sometimes they, you know, we're not happy the way that they're changing the world, right? They're protesting and like, don't you have, you know, how do you have time for this? They're protesting and they're demanding change, and they're doing all this stuff, except for, remember, my highest, greatest calling was to get a job and provide for my family. Those were the two things that I could do. And as such, I raised my subsequent generation. They didn't struggle to find a job, right? So I told them, not so subtly, go out in the world and make a difference. And you're special. You ever said those words? You can make a difference. You're special. We have, right?
Yeah.
We all said, yeah. And now that they're making a difference, we don't like where they're parking their car, but they're doing exactly what we told them to do. Yeah. Exactly what we told them to do. This generation that is changing our perspective on everything is only doing what we asked them to do, whether subtly or through communication. So there's whole separate issues. So I try not to get too mad about the things that they do. I'm like, well, they're only doing what we asked them to do. We just don't like what they're doing, right?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I had a conversation with one of my kids a couple weeks ago, kind of similarly, in that, like, I struggle to know how to relate to my children in a lot of ways, because, like, one, yes, there's this, and hopefully I don't offend anybody. I'm sure I will, and so forgive me. But like, there was that generation, like you said, like, we raised him up, you know, and some people call it helicopter parenting, or, you know, the participation trophies and all that kind of stuff, right? And it's like we raise them up to say, hey, you could be whatever you want, you could do anything. And, you know, in some ways, I think work ethic has slipped. I think the idea, and like we know, like you and I know, that like the 9 to 5 work a 40-year career isn't a thing anymore. Like that just doesn't happen, right? And so we look at like our own biases, and I have another guy that I interviewed who refers to it as mother, father, teacher, preacher, which, you know, I really like. And it's like all the things that we're taught. And then obviously we try to teach those down to our kids. But the culture and the society is changing with the advent of technology, I think, of being the driving force. It's not the only thing, but it's a big piece of it. Like my kids learn things faster and at their, I mean, at a ridiculous pace, and they're able to discern what they like and what they don't like very, very quickly. And there's so many things, I mean, just language and trends and things that are happening that like I can't keep up. And in a lot of ways I'm I've turned into my dad because I'm like, what is this music you listen to? What is this show that you, I don't understand. And it's not a conversation I'm having with my teenagers. I'm having these conversations with like my 7-year-old who comes downstairs dressed in a way that I'm like, what are you doing? Then it's like, okay, you can be anything you want but that. Like, we're not going to do that. Let's hold off on that. And trying to navigate like all of those things, right? So I love that you brought that up, because it's the be careful what you ask for, because you might get it, right? And then how much of that are we able to manage? And you know, it's funny, we're leaving town, we're headed to doTERRA's big thing, and we have some people coming to house sit and watch our kids. And I was talking with them today about, you know, they were asking what's their routine, what do the kids need, and I said, you know, we're pretty hands off parents. Our kids are pretty free to do as they choose, which is awesome. And it can be overwhelming because we give them agency. Like I believe that, you know, as an adult, I can't tell you what to do. And so I don't do that with my kids. I don't tell my kids, you know, we try to guide them and keep them safe. And yes, there are rules and guidelines and boundaries that hopefully will form good habits. But compared to like most families and child rearing, it's like they have very loose schedules. And it's the first time I've had to like verbalize that to someone, because it's always been family watching our kids who know our lifestyle and know what we're doing. And so they're very easy to fold in. And I'm like, oh, I have to walk this person through not just their day-to-day routine, but like our parenting philosophy, which I now have to like verbalize and communicate and try to be succinct with, which is, you know, something we've not had to do. um so yeah, just it's crazy times. It's crazy with what's happening. I think the concepts of like accountability and vulnerability that I like to talk about are really being challenged right now, because you can't look at what's happening with, you know, if we use the current administration and what's happening in the Middle East as an example, or vaccines as an example, or, you know, all these, which used to be topics you and I could just talk about. Now they're controversial and we'll get hate mail and it'll be a big deal. But like all of those things, the accountability and a lot of that has just been tossed away. And it's my job to take care of you. It's my job to bring up your country. It's my job to protect. And I wonder what that's going to do 20 years from now.
I don't know. I mean, who was it that wrote that book? Jocko Willis. Jocko Willis.
Yeah, Willink, I think is this.
Something. Jocko Willis. Something. Extreme accountability.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking.
Yeah,
I don't think I have
I
extreme
haven't read it.
accountability. Yeah, I
Oh,
mean, and so he had an interesting story there, and he talked about his SEAL teams guy, and he does, you know, a lot of
yeah.
coaching now, and he talked about one story that he told. He was like, you know, his team did something, whatever it was, like they were out there and they did something, and they did something wrong, and he knew somebody was going to have to fall on the sword, and he just said, look, that's me. And they're like, yeah, but it wasn't you. And he's like, doesn't matter if it wasn't me. I'm responsible for that situation. I brought these guys to the party. Somebody screwed up the party.
Yep.
It's me, right? Like I should have known that. And even, you know, even in And so he talks about like within the SEALs, that extreme accountability is important. But it was a little higher level up. And they were like, I don't understand what you're talking about. Like, don't you want to burn somebody down for this? Like, you feel free to throw somebody in front of the bus. And he's like, no, it's me. Like, if you want to drop kick somebody, drop kick me, or I will solve this problem. And he did. And so to your point about like personal accountability, I mean, I think, so I've heard it both ways on all these different topics, right? About us having this accountability issue and kind of this agency, right? And so, and we talk about agency versus free agency, and I'm a firm believer that it's not free. You still have to pay the price. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we miss off. Like, people say, well, I have my free agency. I'm like, it ain't free as long as you're willing to pay for it. Like, whatever. Right. Like, and we can't get to the, I don't think we can be to the Lord of the Flies situation where everybody just do whatever the heck they want with no accountability kind of a thing. But so here's an interesting concept when it comes to that payment, the pay to play. And I was having this conversation with a gal the other day. And she was just talking about, what were we talking about? Oh, it's just, it was actually one of our kind of marriage coaching things we were doing. And I was just following up, and I said, well, I'm trying to remember the whole concept. Young and divorced, didn't want to be, and blames him,
Yeah.
And my point in the whole conversation was like, well, have you forgiven yourself? Right. And she's like, well, what do I have to do? He's the one that went off with all these other women and did this whole other thing. And I'm like, okay, so like, here's an example. And this kind of gets to the point. Like in Japan, they have a thing called no fault insurance. I still don't know if they still do, but I'll use this as an example. So I'm in a stoplight and you rear end me, right? My insurance company pays 50% of the claim. Why? Because I was there.
Yeah.
That's it, right?
Participate in the situation.
Yeah. And so this is where I think that we need to, and then I'll bring in one of my favorite quotes from Charlotte, which she says, it's an awfully thin pancake that doesn't have two sides. Like, oftentimes we only hear one side of the story, right? Like, he's this, it's so bad, and all this awesome. What's the other side? Because I need you to flip the pancake over and show me your side, right? And so when it comes to accountability, we need to just, and so in this young lady's situation, she needs to realize that she did still have some role to play in what happened, whether or not she was just there, right? Like, maybe your only responsibility is you said yes to this guy. And maybe that's it, but you still have to forgive yourself for that, right? Because if you can't forgive yourself for your role in that situation, you're not going to be able to move forward and be any good to anyone, including yourself. So the same thing goes for, our accountability. Like, we always wanted to say it's everybody else's fault, but we still need to own our crap, right? And I think that's it. Own our crap.
Yeah, it reminds me of
somebody said that in Shift event, right? There was a whole talk about that.
Yeah, 100%. There's a book, Gay Hendricks, The Big Leap. In that book, he talks about in every argument, both parties are 100% responsible. And when I heard that, I was like, well, you can't have two people be 100%. Like, that just doesn't compute. Like, math doesn't. But as he explains it, like, it's and for me, I read this at a time when I was really diving into like my own crap, right? And I was like, well, that's not fair because my wife does X, Y, and Z, and I'm not responsible. But when you really get into it, it's like, you are 100% because I said yes. Like, I picked her and she said yes to me. And if she wants to pick a fight and I respond, then I'm 100% responsible for getting into it with it. I could just go, oh, okay, that's an interesting point of view, and walk away, right? And I love what you said about it costing something. There's a pastor that I listen to, Andy Stanley, and he said he's doing a series right now, and he says, we don't know if integrity guides us until maintaining integrity costs us. And for me, integrity and accountability are hand in hand a lot because, our integrity shows up when we own our stuff, when we say, hey, this is on me. This is what I'm dealing with. And it's interesting to me because there's tension there, because I can be 100% accountable for my stuff, but I don't live in a vacuum. None of us live in a vacuum. And so what I do, I go to help this person or this country, or there's a global pandemic, and there are things I can do to help my fellow man, but that costs me. I have to make an educated decision. And so if I choose to get vaccinated, then I choose to take on those risks for other people, or I choose not to because I choose that risk is too great for myself. but then I'm choosing to possibly put other people at risk, right? And like there's this tension within that, and all those conversations and all those decisions. And I feel like we used to be at a time where like people would say, I get that, I appreciate that, I think you're thoughtful, you know, and be able to look at somebody's point of view that maybe in misalignment with your own, but still respect them. And I feel like we've gotten to this place where like, man, if you don't agree, we start to get really, really, you know, judgmental or angry or, you know, almost enemy. I don't know if enemy is the right word, but like adversarial, right? Like it's, well, they don't think like I think, and everything becomes a danger. Like I don't know how to get past that. It's just, it's been this weird thing I've been going through the last couple of weeks. And I just had a conversation with a friend of mine who's making some decisions that I don't really agree with. And it was funny because as he was telling me what was happening in his life, I was like angry and frustrated and wanted to yell at him. And the only thing I could respond with was, I know you're a thoughtful person. And I know this is probably really hard on you. And that was it. Because everything else I wanted to say was going to be, what's wrong with you? Like, I just want to shake you. Right.
Yeah, but you actually did the absolute best thing, right? I mean, the point for that whole situation really is, like, yeah, I mean, and I love the way you put that, because I think you say that often. It's like, I know you're a thoughtful person, which is the same as like, I know that you've spent some time and energy, thinking about this. Is you didn't just like, I'm not saying that hey, dummy, have you rubbed two thoughts together maybe on this one, or are you just jumping straight out of your skin?
Right.
We have a similar situation to that. And I don't know if I told you this story last time or not, but we have lost the ability to have considered discussions. Does that make sense? Where we can
1000%.
disagree with somebody. And I had this patient, and he was clearly on the other side of what, we're talking about, talking about just this discourse of, a courteous discourse when it comes to political ideology, and we can't even debate anymore because debates are just yelling back and forth, right? Yeah. I think we talked about that on the last time, but so I had this patient, and he was completely, one side on ideology for me, right? I could tell he was, he had different thoughts and processes, and but he said something at the very end of his treatment, probably like 2 months, on and off. I'd seen him, and he was just finally getting better. And he left, and he said, I really enjoy talking to you every day about like these different things. He's like, it really means a lot to me that we can just have these discussion. And he's like, I haven't told you, but I know that you don't see things the same way that I do. But he's like, you just listened, and he said, you asked good questions. You asked questions that made me think. And I'm like, you asked a lot of questions that made me think, one of which the current president changed the tax code 365 times in 1 year. And I'm like, what? And he's like, every day. Wow. Every day there's a new change of tax code. I'm like, are you serious? He's like, yeah, he's an accounting major. And I'm like,
yeah,
okay, wow, that's weird. All right. Just the stuff that we don't know. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
But I like to, I wish we could do that more.
I do too. And the friendships that I value the most are the friendships where we can have those types of conversations. And I wonder if it's possible. And I think it takes somebody, and I think a lot of conflict does this. I think it takes somebody on one side of that conflict going or saying to themselves, what if I'm wrong? And giving themselves the opportunity to say, well, what if I'm wrong? Like, to have the vulnerability to say, I might be wrong. And what I've found is, even when I think I know 1,000% something to be true, if I hear an opposing point of view, if I hear someone tell me something that I think is crazy, if I can bring myself to that place where I can say, well, what if they're right? What if I'm wrong? And give them the space to share. And I've had, I've got a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old who are getting into that place where they start to ask themselves, what they believe, or they're getting all sorts of influence and input and stimuli. And they ask me all the time, like, what do you think? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't have the ability to tell you what I believe to be true, because in so many of these instances, we only have a sliver of the information. And so the best I think any of us can do is like have an educated guess. And what I've found for me anyways, the people that I talk to about these types of things, and I start to get into the conversations, is if they've only read the headline and they've not done any sort of research or real in-depth reading, they don't know where to go from there. And all they feel or hear is that I'm wrong and I'm dumb and I don't know, but they don't want to admit that. They don't want to say, well, I just read the headline, I don't really have all those details. Because I mean, I read 2 news articles today, and both of them, the headline did not match the information. And I was like, I'm done. I'm out. I can't read it anymore. And I went downstairs, and my daughter was like, what's going on? And I was like, well, I just tried to read the news, and it's all BS, you know. But most people don't do that. They just read the headline, and then they formulate
the blurb,
Yeah.
like whatever it is.
Yeah, and then they don't even formulate an opinion on it. They take that as fact. This is the truth. And I'm like, well, I don't know. Are you familiar with Eckhart Tolle? He's a German philosopher.
I mean, the name sounds familiar, but
he was big on Oprah's show for a while. They did some stuff together, but he wrote a book. And in that book, I can't remember the name of the book. And I'll have to throw it in the show notes or something. But in that book, he basically presents the idea that like once you formulate a belief on something, the danger in that is that every other possibility becomes a lie. And like that struck me, and I was just like, oh,
that's amazing. It's
like,
true, right?
It's so true. So I have very few beliefs. Like people ask me, like, it's like that scene from what was it? The Kevin Costner baseball Bull Durham, I think, when he's like, well, I believe this and I believe that and I believe it. And I'm like, I believe in Jesus and I love my wife. And that's like everything else is like, I think, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. I believe I get it wrong 50% of the time, and not intentionally.
Yeah.
I believe that. That sounds about right for me.
Yeah. I don't know if that's ego, if that's
it's ego. It's ego.
Yeah,
we don't want to be wrong. In my profession, some people are so surprised when I tell them I don't know. Like, what do you think it is? I'm like, I don't know. But I don't know. But
profession,
yeah.
You're a physical therapist, right? Like that's
yeah. So I have my doctorate degree in physical therapy, and it's like, I mean, here we're, there's a research article on low back pain, like this whole thing, right? And so I'm doing a presentation on back pain, but like you'd think I'd know back pain, right? But I want to know it better. But some people are like, I think sometimes, especially, I don't know. I think it takes a certain amount of maturity to just go, I don't know. I'm still figuring it out, But I think we have to be able to admit that we're wrong, or at least admit that the possibility that part of information is flawed, that not all of our information is correct, and that we have institutional bias, for whatever that means. I'm still trying to figure that out, right? But I think we still need to do that. But I love that. I love that quote, right? Like everything else is a lie, which oftentimes explains why these people who were so stalwart in one belief, direction, product, religion, ideology, whatever, right? And then when they decide to change, they're 108, they're all the way off to the other side again because they were hurt that they spent so much time on this one set of beliefs, instead of just saying, like, there always has to be a chance that I could have more information. And maybe that's a better way to put it. Like, I could always have better information.
Yeah. And you might actually land in the same place.
Well, yeah.
But you might have a little more grace. You might have a little more compassion. You might have a little more understanding. It's sort of the either or conversation for me. Like, do you believe in, fossil fuels or wind power? And it's like, yes.
Yes.
Yes. They both, yes. Like this either or. And it's like, I did a whole podcast on the ampersand, which is, the little squiggly thing that means and.
Yeah.
for me, it's like that's the $1 million answer. Is okay, great. So you wrote a book, and like you've opened multiple practices, and in many ways you crush it in that industry. And like so what's next? What does that mean? What is that? That can't be. That doesn't define you. It doesn't. And for me, it's like if we could just get to a place where everything isn't so black and white, and it's not either or, and we have the ability. And for me, I think I landed there because I came from like this really dysfunctional house or upbringing, and unlike a lot of children or people who are raised, in maybe healthier homes, and maybe that's my own biases being put on that, but you know, when people's core values and belief systems or structures are challenged, it's often because they got them from their mother, father, teacher, preacher. And it's like, well, those are people I grew up admiring and revering, and we're supposed to respect. And so if you tell me that they're wrong, then I'm dishonoring them, and it's like, well, no, we're not even saying they're wrong. We're just saying they had a piece of it. Here's some other pieces, and can we carry it all in one basket, or does it have to be like this is it and the rest of it's not, right? Like, yeah, I just wonder how we get. And for me, it's my kids, right? Like if I can raise my kids to be ampersand people, and not, one-sided on things, then hopefully that ripples out, and like that's the best I can do.
So I have a question for you, and this is weird because it's I got this really cool glow, like a Glenn Beck thing going on right now. I like it. But so I have a question for you, and you did, if you already have a podcast, just go ahead and say you already got podcasts on this. And so I was raised single parent, multiple sort of dads as my mom tried to find the right one, and she did. She landed with one. But I was already out of the house by then. So I often tell my kids, like, especially when I'm struggling, I'm just like, look, I don't know how to be a dad. I don't. Like, I'm likely getting this stuff wrong. I just know I'm going to be there for you. And I'm going to love you unconditionally. But I don't know if I know how to be a dad. Like, it's like, and I hear stories, like we were out with some friends and he was telling me a story about a song that came on. He's like, oh, and I called my dad and we used to talk about music. And I'm just like, a little bit. But so tell me, what does that mean to you when I say I don't know how to be a dad?
I agree.
I know your journey, so
Yeah.
I know that you probably don't want to be like yours, right?
No, I didn't want kids, and my kids know this. Like I've shared this with them,
Yeah.
and I did not. I came from a really dysfunctional house, and my dad and I are good. It's interesting we're talking about it because today would have been my birth mother's birthday. She was killed when I was 3. And so I went back to live with my dad. They had already divorced. Actually, the woman that he was with before he divorced my mom, I think, if I did the math right, which is irrelevant. But I didn't really want to have kids, and I met Carrie. We got married really young. We got married after we had our first kid together, and I was scared to death of being a father more than being a husband. And when we got married, I shared that with her. Like I feel like I could be a husband. I feel like I could be a dad without being a husband. So I wasn't sure we were gonna get married. Then we got married, and I probably spent the first 5 or 6 years of our marriage doing everything I could to sabotage it, dismantle it, because that's what we did. Like I went into my marriage with the idea that like I'll get divorced. My dad was married 3 times. My mom was with multiple people. My dad and my stepmom got separated when I was 16. So I just like that's just like marriages were just like seasonal. They weren't forever.
May, December.
Yeah, it wasn't like forever. Like forever was just a thing we said because it made people feel good.
Right.
And so Carrie and I almost got divorced probably about year 6 of being married. Maybe year 5. It was early on. Reagan was 3, so it's probably about our 5th year in. And we really didn't get divorced because of the kids. Because I was like, whether I want to be a dad or not, I have these 2 humans, and I sort of have this opportunity or this choice to make about showing up for them or not. And so, you know, people say don't stay married for your kids, and I would suggest you stay married for whatever works for you. like try to make it work, you know. And it worked. That was the the sort of genesis of why we stayed together. Um, and and we didn't just stay together for them and decide we would have a loveless marriage. We decided we would figure out how to be married. And now we have 8 kids, and I love being a dad. My wife's out of town. I've been single dad in it for a week, you know, doing soccer and cooking and all the things. And I love being a dad. But what it took for me was realizing probably about 15 years ago that I was not given any of the training. I didn't have good fatherhood modeled. So, you know, I don't think most dads go out and like work to train their kids on how to be dads or train their sons, but it's modeled for them. Hopefully, you hope that they see it and they feel it and they experience it. And I didn't have any of that modeled for me. So where I landed was like, I need to go figure it out. And so I looked for other dads, other men that were, you know, I thought were good dads. And one of the things that, and asked for help, asked for advice, and said, well, how do I do this? And Carrie's dad, my father-in-law, was one of them. And in a lot of ways, it was none of them knew what they were doing. None of them knew how. It's the same stuff we've been talking about. You know, you're 20, 30, 40 when you have a kid, and that kid is growing up in a time and an experience that you have no idea how to relate to. And so I think the most successful dads are the ones who are honest and vulnerable and say, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm doing the best I can. Let's figure it out together and show up and be present. And what's crazy, I have 6 daughters, and I have 3 sisters. And one of my sisters, we didn't talk for like a year and a half, because I said something to her that was me just sharing my opinion. And I'm an idiot. What's my opinion worth? That's just what I thought. But what I found out a year and a half later, when I realized, hey, man, really, like, what's going on? I had hurt her feelings. She took what I said very, very deeply. And I was like, oh my gosh. I'm like, I didn't even think about that. And I've found the same thing with my daughters. Like, I don't think men recognize, and I think a lot of it has to do with some cultural systems that we put in place where we, you know, downplay masculinity and we challenge fathers and husbands and things like that. But I don't think men realize how important it is for them to just be present with their kids. Like, just be in the same room, acknowledge their existence. My girls are constantly asking me to help me with stuff that only requires, you know, 1 or 2 hands. I don't need, I have to be more conscious and more, I have to work harder to allow them to help. But it means the world to them to just be there. And so, yeah, it's an interesting thing to start to unpack, especially when we talk about accountability and vulnerability and what it looks like, because that ego piece that we're all so polarized by right now, like, I think it's wrecking kids in a lot of ways. I don't know. I'm worried about our future generations for sure.
Well, it's interesting, right? As we think about this, and so I love your story, because it just, you know, I mean, it really represents being present, right? And like, how do we manage that piece, right, of how to be present with our children, and how to help them. And
Yeah.
I will tell you that, like, you get older kids, and like, those messages were my son. He's driving the U-Haul, and he's like, I'm nervous about driving up the hill, and I'm texting him, so like, it's going to be fine, right? But it's funny, as I ask my older kids, so 26, 24, and now 18, and then the 12-year-olds, you know, I always say, look, I got another chance to get it right. Like maybe I can do this thing and not have many screw ups. But as I ask my kids, like, what's the most important memory to you? Like, what do you remember? Like, you know, like dad zone stuff. Like, what was it? You know? And
Yeah.
my oldest said something, like, he sent me a meme, and he was like, when I was a kid, I used to like watch my dad work on cars or something, right? It was like, help work on cars so that one day I would be able to work on cars myself. And he's like, and now I'm sitting here watching my dad work on my car, and I'm still old enough to, you know, and like, you know, I think sometimes we need to provide, as you said, those opportunities to let them just, And sometimes it just, it is harder having them help us with stuff, but it is right with the girls. It's, I have one daughter and three boys. And I tell you, it's a challenge to switch gears to the tender side of the equation,
Yeah.
And so, even to that, and this is to take both sides of the equation. My two oldest were completely different. My oldest, I could just look at him. I mean, he would be like, as a kid, he'd tear up. Like my number two, I could look at him and yell at him, right? Like, can't believe you threw the rocks at the car that we're driving by to see if you could hit one. You're such an idiot, like all this, right? Yeah. And he would just look at me like, and like, just when are you going to be done yelling at me? Like, I got other things to do.
Yep.
And
are you done yet?
So, yeah. Are you done yet? Like,
yep.
Yeah. Seems to be a pattern in his life, because he and his brother got busted. They narrowly missed a car when they were like 7 and 8, throwing rocks across the street, like 6-year-olds. Right?
Mine had better aim. He took out the rear windshield.
Yeah. Well, when he was in high school with some friends, they were throwing oranges, because they're plentiful in California, at cars that were at stoplights, but happened to hit an undercover cop.
Oh, that's a good time.
Who put them all on the curb,
Yeah.
And then made us come and get him. When I was like,
that's good.
Taking him? He's like, no. I'm like, I think you should take him. And he's like,
yeah,
take him. He's stupid.
Yeah.
But cool. Well, thanks for answering that question. I like that.
Thanks for asking it.
I always wondered if I've been alone in that.
No, I think I definitely not. My it's funny. My son told me something the other day. I guess it was right around Father's Day, so a couple months ago now. And he was like, Dad, I don't know what to do for Father's Day because you're not like a real dad. And I was like, what? I mean, we've joked about you being adopted, but you know that that's not true. And he's like, no. He's like, you don't drink, you don't golf, you don't work on cars. He's like, I don't know what to do with you. I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't. He's like, and you don't wear ties. And I was like, no, absolutely not. Do I ever wear like? And it was funny because and I kind of asked him, I was like, well, is that hard for you? Like, is that issue? And he was like, no. He's like, it's just, you go to Target, you go to, try to buy something, and it's, all the stereotypical 1950s dad things that so many of us don't fit into that mold anymore. And I just made me laugh. And then like later that day, I made some sort of dad joke, and he was like, oh, there it is. Yep. You're dad. Yep. That's what it is.
That'll bring it back.
It's this weird tension. And one of the things that I'm sort of leaning into lately is not resolving the tension. And a lot of people, well, even in like physical therapy, like your job is to help relieve tension, right? And there's sort of, so this might be a good segue, it might not, I don't know. But I listened to this really great podcast, and they talked about the tension between truth and grace, and how we have to have equal parts of it, and we can't ever resolve that tension, right? So like as dads, as humans, as governments, as people, there's always going to be that tension between here's what you did and the grace that you can be redeemed, you can be, people make mistakes. And as much as we try to resolve that tension, we're humans. We're always going to make mistakes. We're going to continue to screw up. And so there's always going to be a little bit of that, and a little bit of truth, and a little bit of grace. And that whole concept of like maintaining tension has really struck with me. I did do a podcast on this where I talked about the rubber band is only useful in existence when it is under tension. And so that like kind of validated that message I heard. And so I've been really thinking about that a lot lately, because it's like accountability requires us to say how we feel, what we've done, what that looks like. It's going to create tension. And for some reason, as human beings, we're always trying to resolve the tension and like live at peace and have balance and all these things. And I've sort of gotten to this place in the last couple of months, maybe last year, where it's like, I don't want any of that. I want to live in the tension. I want to exist somewhere in the middle of that, recognizing that like you can't have good without bad. You can't have happy without like there has to be that tension between it. And I think for parents, if we could get to that place where it's like, yes, I can be my kid's friend and I can be their disciplinarian, right? It's that going back to the and. It's not either or. It's not, and like shifting the mindset of it's okay to be in tension. Like it's okay to have that exist. And
Right. So, and I can't even think of like how many different metaphors there are for it, right? I mean, it's like I've got this little post-it note on my laptop, right? And every time I open the laptop, right on the keyboard, on that one little dead space that doesn't do anything next to that stupid mouse pad, right, is a little post-it note, and it's torn, and I keep retaping it down, and it says, sometimes you have to work like no one will work to live the way you want to live.
yeah.
Right. And the other piece, which is, growth never happens in a vacuum. You have to push yourself. There's something that has to happen. And it's so, we could relate that to muscles, because muscles don't grow unless you strain them, like, period. And it truly is a use it or lose it situation when it comes to muscles and strength. But yeah, I mean, there are times for tension, and there's times to let off the tension, right? And I think that's sort of what it's almost like a cheat day if you're working on your diet, right? Like, you can't be great all 100% of the time, but you can just keep working. And it's sort of like that grace, right? I mean, there's grace that will make up the difference. But yeah, I mean, that's an interesting segue. We can always talk about just sort of mindset. I did have one little note as we're segueing off, because you said maybe this will offend some people or not, and I love that. And probably the thing I love, well, I don't know, there's a lot to love about you, but one of the things I like best about you is just the simple fact that, and sometimes I think you work on this post, I think you do a good job of trying to do it, but I heard it, I don't know, some social media person, they talked about people hating on you, right? And getting some bad mail. And they were like, give me your haters. It means I have more people to like me. But, and it's true. And I'm this way in my business as well. In the physical therapy side of the business, not the other. It's like, dude, you don't like everybody.
Yeah.
Do you like everybody? No, I don't like everybody. I don't, right? So stop trying to make everybody like you.
Yeah.
I think that's what we do. We're like, oh, I want everybody to be like this and that. I was like, well, I mean, I might not be. As a physical therapist, I am brash. I will insult you probably a little bit. I will make fun of you if you're working hard, right? And I will ask if those are real tears. I will literally, one of my favorite quotes is, I'll walk over to the desk, I'll come back, I'm like, I'm fresh out of sympathy, time to go.
Yeah,
I mean, and yeah, it's like, hey, I mean, or my other one was like, oh, did you sign up for massage therapy or real therapy? Because massage therapy is not here, that's down the street. Easy work down the street. So like, if you come here, like, bring your big girl pants, right? Strap up, bring a bottle of water and towel, because like, we're going to get it done, right? And that's all okay, right? And some people don't want that, and I let them opt out. I'm fine. Like, day one, I'm just like, there might be a better place for you. Honestly, there might be a better place, but 98% of people love what we do because we're different, right? And so to the end where people just like, I don't like you. I'm like, you know what? I don't like everything about you either, but we can still be friends. Here's the fun part. We can still be friends.
Yeah.
I can still respect you. I can still respect you. And I think we've lost that ability, right? I can still respect you, but anyway.
Yeah, I think
there's a segue for therapy and pain in there somewhere, but we'll try to
get there. There is, and I think, I mean, for me, it's mindset. It's, we get to choose, right? And there's this great quote. I talked about it on the last podcast, or the next one, depending on how these air.
All right.
It's a quote that's often attributed to Viktor Frankl, and I'm not so sure that he said it, but it's one of my favorite quotes. And it's, between stimulus and response, there's a space, and in that space, we get to choose. And it's that choice that provides our freedom, right? Excuse me. And for me, like what you just shared, that whole pain, and mindset is, I get to choose what hurts and what doesn't. I get to choose, in an emotional state, and even in a physical state in some ways. Like, I get to decide whether it's, oh my gosh, this hurts. Like, I was at the gym yesterday, and I wasn't following a specific routine. So I was kind of doing some PRs and trying to just see what I could do. And, I was sore this morning, and I get to choose to feel sore and miserable, and it's hard for me to move, or I get to be grateful and that like that I can move, that I can feel. And so it's like what I recognized in that was that like the physical pain seemed to be less because I was putting joy around it, not misery. Right. And I'm not a scientist. I don't have any research to back that up, but I think in your experience, you can say that like you probably do have some. So I think it's a great segue into, you know, that physical piece. And so, I mean, I'll just kind of let you take it from there because I know you have some.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. And I'll tell you actually a couple of different stories about just where mindset and gratitude. So I do this a little piece on gratitude as well. But so like I always say that when you work out and the next day and you get out of the chair, you start making that noise. It's like, oh, right. And I always say it starts with arg, like right. But I always think it starts with AAW, right? And those of us who enjoy that, where we just like, oh, awesome. Right. This sucks because I did it. Right. And I'm okay with that. Like, that's awesome. So I had we're going to call it the tale of two patients. Right. So, and it talks about gratitude. So I had, and it's a formative moment in my physical therapy career and drives a lot of the things that I do now. And that's why I'm going to share it with you. So, so I had two patients, both relatively at the same time, both female, both 60s. One was a long-term nurse. The other one was, I don't know what she did, but she liked to hike and water ski and all kinds of stuff. And she, and the one gal had one knee replacement, and then we did with that, and she was good. So they're both doing like a knee replacement, second time around on the knee replacement. Well, so this girl that was super active, and loved to just have this different outlook on life, was always grateful, right? All these types of things. Her knee wasn't going well, went back to the doctor, realized I had an infection, and they took the knee out and they put a spacer in. Just these two rubber blocks, essentially two polyester blocks between the two bones. And you just sort of walk around a long leg brace, just, doing this, right? I mean, horrific to imagine. They're giving you IV antibiotics the whole time. You gotta like have a port, and right, it sucks. The nurse had the same thing, had an infection, but didn't have to have her knee taken out, but just struggled with, just some pain and discomfort. And then they were all on relatively the same track. The one gal just said, oh, I this and that, and, I'm fine. She came to see me. She walked into the clinic, crutches, literally. Right. And they weren't exactly the same time, but it provides some perspective. So, clear the infection, get the new knee put in, do some rehab, boom. Like, she sends me text messages like, hey, I went water skiing. Hey, I hiked up to Mount whatever, and hey, I did this, like, thank you, you really changed my perspective. And another gal who was really nice and really sweet, and we loved her as well. It's not like she was a Debbie Downer, but always just a little bit, just like, I can't believe this happened to me. This, I can't, this whole thing. Well, she overdosed, and I went to her funeral.
Wow.
And yeah, well, see, there you go. It's been dark. But there's a difference between being grateful and your mindset of just success and gratitude for the ability to move forward. And the other one who had a different mindset, where she really, really struggled and didn't as much work on her internal mindset. Now, whether it was an accident, her husband doesn't think it was an accident, but so she overdosed, and I sort of knew it, sort of saw it coming, but didn't really say anything about it. So can you guess what happens if I see any patients that are depressed and have medications?
Oh, absolutely.
I don't let them go very far, especially if they say anything like, my kids. Like, I had one patient who says, oh, my kids left town, they took all the guns. I called their doctor. I'm like, hey, look, I might be just that guy, but I've only lost one, and one is the number that I'm satisfied with for my entire career.
Yeah, that's it. That's all it takes.
Yeah, zero. I'd be satisfied with zero, but unfortunately I have one because I wasn't paying attention enough, right? Yeah. And so, right, gratitude will, the mindset of gratitude and all that will completely change things. Now, when we talk about pain, you want me to share the story? Yeah, I'll share the story because it's the funny story about the palm frond. So we talk about, this whole perception of pain. Like, our brain will tell us when we're in pain, or actually tissue damage, right? And we see it in the movies. It's not really the same as the movies, but we know real life stories. Tissue damage, somebody gets, a car runs over their leg and they get up and run, or they crash on their motorcycle and they get up and they run, right? And they have these devastating injuries, right? But the way that people handle pain is completely different, and they run through this cycle, whether their mindset is going to allow them to catastrophize everything. Like, oh, again, it's happening to me again. Like, oh no, Eeyore, right? And so for those individuals, they're going to run into this chronic pain loop, and we need to figure out a way to interrupt it. And for other individuals, and unfortunately, 1 in 4 injuries runs into this catastrophizing loop, and we have to figure out a way to break that, because it doesn't really matter. It's all about our perception of pain. And so, kind of to that, I'll tell you, a great self-effacing story.
Quick question: have you ever read about locus of control? Are you familiar with that term?
I've heard of it. Tell me.
It's basically a psychological term that there's kind of 2 types of people in the world: ones that believe life is happening to them, and ones that believe that life is happening for them. And like, not just related to pain, but like when you talk about catastrophizing things, it made me think of that, because I'm just out of curiosity, and something you maybe look into later is how those things, correlate to one another. Because there's a lot of studies that have been done, like when things happen, it's people who look at something and are able to go, okay, that's a circumstance, I can work through that, or okay, that's a circumstance, I'm done, like it's it, because that's what's happened to me, kind of a thing. So yeah, it's a psychological concept that might be interesting to you.
No, it's absolutely true. And so and we do, and a lot of our research has to deal with just whether or not people think. So there's a whole series actually on back pain, but there's a whole series of questions on back pain surveys about whether or not you think that going back to work, or you think that moving is bad for your back. There's a huge psychological component. Interestingly enough, the number 1 determination for when you have rotator cuff surgery, right? Number 1 determining factor for you getting better, whether or not you think you will.
I believe it.
Number 1 out of all the rest, whether it's function and severity of tear and age and smoking and unsmoking, all those types of things. Number 1 factor is whether you think you're going to get better.
I believe
if you think you're going to get better, you're going to have a great outcome. Yeah. And that starts with your surgeon, right? Like, you're going to you're going to do this, you're going to do physical therapy, you're going to stay after it. It's going to hurt a little bit, but you're going to get better. Like, when they say that, instead of just like cut and run, like, my job's way easier. Yeah.
Do you think a lot of that lands on the medical professional to be able to say, because there's liability, like I think of like Carrie's stroke and some of the things that our family has experienced, and I always find that most medical professionals, they want to be positive, but they also don't want to oversell it, right? And I don't know. I personally feel like Carrie just had a root canal and a crown redone, and she's everything about my wife is unique. She's a unicorn, and like, she's got this root that's like half an inch longer than any other root on the planet, and it curves twice, and she's nothing can be straightforward. And the dentist, the specialist, was like, well, I'm gonna do the best I can, and I don't know if I'm gonna be able to get to it all, and I'll reset the crown, but I doubt it'll make it through the parking lot. And when Carrie shared with me that was like kind of what he said, I was sort of like, well, shit, then it's not going to make it to, like, no, it's going to be fine. like that's not the message that we should be sending people off. And it's a week later and the crown is sitting fine and everything's great. But it's like, my first thought when he said that was, no. Let's not set the expectation so low, because then that's we're going to create the story that makes that happen.
Yeah, and I think we like to give ourselves an out as professionals, right? It's the same thing as me saying I don't know, but bear in mind, for me at my end, PT is either the first thing that you do or the last thing that you do. It's rarely the thing you do in the middle. Like, the people that are, that they sent to us, they come out of the gate like, look, I need PT for my shoulder, right? And then, and the ones that are just like, well, I've tried everything else, I guess I'll try PT. Like, somebody finally, I don't know, I have anything else to do, they try PT. I'm like, you're a freaking train wreck. Like, you want me to fix you? And, and I'm honest with people too. I'm like, how long you had back pain? 20 years. Okay. Well, how long is it going to take? I'm like, how about 10 years? Yeah. Again, this is, you get Robert flavor. I'm like, how about 10 years? And they're like, 10 years? Well, you've been screwing it up for 20. Right. Like, how about you give me half as long to fix it? And they're like, well, that seems long. I'm like, how about 6, 7 months? They're like, oh, that sounds better. If you say
Yes.
that out of the gate when they're thinking 2 weeks, like everybody wants magic, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, and that's, from a business coaching standpoint, when you'll see the biggest problems when it comes to like patient satisfaction. Um, Oddly enough, in physical therapy, patient satisfaction getting better is not the top 6.
Really?
Yeah. You ask patients who are satisfied with their care, and you say, what are the things that you like best about physical therapy, and what are the things, like, my doctor referred you, they were knowledgeable, they were kind, they took great care of me, like all these things, right? And that has a lot to do with mindset, right? If you can get them wrapped around the fact that sometimes they did something that's not going to get 100% better, but we're going to do great, right? Under promise, over deliver. That's always my thing.
Well, it's the Maya Angelou thing, right? Like, they don't remember what you said; they remember how you made them feel.
Yep,
So if they
it's all
show up
about
and
how
feel good and they feel like you care, but like it also kind of says something about the status of, like, I don't know, maybe this isn't an American thing, but I'll say, like, the American healthcare system, like, the expectation is not to get better. It's like, which it should be, like, that kind of should be, like,
Yeah.
because I mean, for us at least, we're very sort of root cause oriented and solutions driven people. So, I always look at it like, if I'm not seeing improvement, if it's not getting better, or if I'm not losing weight, or I'm not growing my business, or like whatever there's somebody shared a new, academy for social selling and how to build online your business. And all these people loved it and loved it, loved it. And I commented and said, well, can any of you tell me how your number went up, your business grew, or your profits increased? And they were like, well, that's not the point. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, it's a social selling academy. The idea is to sell, and you invested in it. So what's like, but our expectations, I think, have been set. Like, as long as we feel good, we're okay.
It really is. Oftentimes PT is about how you make people feel, right? And my business partner's got a great little, like, vinyl sign in his office that says, we entertain while you're in pain. And but it is like, if you can create an absolute best environment. And oddly enough, my marketing pitch is twofold, depends on who I'm talking to, right? But if I'm talking to physicians, I'm like, look, they're going to get better and they're not going to bitch.
Fair enough.
Like, and I'm not going to script a surgery, and they're like, sold here.
Yeah.
They don't want them back whining about how it still hurts. They don't want you botching the surgery, and they just want it better. I'm like, I'm going to do all 3 of those. Like, I could tell you I'm amazing, but just read my Google reviews.
Yeah.
So, and with patients, it's like, we're just going to make you feel great. That's it. And we're going to be honest with you. And it's funny because I'll tell them, I don't want surgery. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm just going to tell you right now. Like, if I think you need surgery, I'm going to tell you need surgery.
Yeah.
But I don't want surgery. I'm like, it's your healthcare dollars, but I have way too much expectation on me that you have to get better. You have to. If you're not getting better, we're going to have a conversation. I'm going to say, look, I'm not the right thing for you. And 67 more visits aren't going to work. Like, I could take your money, but
yeah. It goes back to the integrity piece, right? Like, you only know if you're driven by integrity when integrity costs you. And when you say, you can't be my patient anymore because I can't help you, right?
Yeah.
That's being of integrity. I'm curious too, like, what your thoughts are being in pain management, in the world of pain management, because I mean, mostly that's what you're doing, right? Physical therapy is to resolve pain issues. What your thoughts and kind of feelings are on that? I'm like, I don't know how to tread lightly. So, pain medication, the instant gratification that people are doing, the things that people feel like, I don't have time for yoga and breathing exercises and mindset work. Just give me oxy or whatever the case may be, right? Like, and I'm probably exaggerating that to some extent, but how do you approach that? Because mindset is such a big piece of it, but not everybody has the skill set to, or the desire. Because, gosh, I mean, that means you got to look in the mirror. That means you got to deal with your shit. So how do you tread those waters in an office environment where they're like, just fix it?
So, I mean, to bring us back to the pain conversation, we talk about where pain is generated, and if I get the inkling that somebody is sort of working into that little catastrophization pain paradigm, and then we start have the conversation about what it looks like, what pain, what really causes pain, especially when my doctor can't find anything and I can't this and I can't that. I'm like, okay, look, let's talk about where pain comes from, right? Pain is driven by the brain. It's not tissue. Like I smashed my finger, it hurts, right? But sometimes you smash your finger and you're like, it doesn't hurt for 30 seconds. Why? Right? Because your brain's finally realizing it's time to say that. And so we'll have conversations with people that are really on that pain side. Now, the problem is that we've taken this whole opioid epidemic and the fault is, well, it wasn't my fault because I don't prescribe. So, if I did prescribe, probably would be partly my fault too, right? And again, like back to the whole thing, like I got to own part of it, right? I'm part of the system, right? It was just like, I take your pain meds, right? But now, like literally, I had a patient who like crashed his motorcycle, hit a rock, he's got like bones sticking out of his hand, and they pin him and plate him and put him together, and he wakes up, and they're like, and his hand just it hurts, right? Like it hurts a lot, and they're like, well, here, take an Advil. He's like, take a what? She's just like, well, we gave you one before surgery, and you should still be doing fine. And he was like, I'm not coming an outpatient. Like, give me freaking pain meds. Like, give me half. Like, I don't care. Like, don't give me 4 Advil. Like, I can do that at home. And so now we've swung so much to the other side that we have ineffectual pain management. Like, let's be honest, when it comes to like surgical procedures, right? If somebody is going to, and I'll get a little graphic because I watched my brother-in-law's total shoulder, like, make an incision in the front, like release the muscles, dislocate the shoulder, right? Take a saw, cut the ball end off of it. Blood is leaking out of the top, right? And then they drill a hole down and hammer a new part in, and they do all this stuff, and then they sew you back up. It looks like the worst car accident you've ever seen, right? And that's just the shoulder, right? They sew you up and put you in there, and they want to give you Tylenol the next, later that day after you wake up. Like, are you freaking kidding me?
Yeah.
Right? Like I get it. We're all trying to manage the long-term opioid epidemic, right? That we're all a part of, but post-surgical patients need pain management. They just won't move, right? That's the problem is they'll just lay in bed like this and not move. And then look, I got to deal with everything, right?
Right.
So, but I think they're doing a much better job of tapering it the way that they should. Now, to that end, there's the other piece, the pain conversation, the breathing, and even yoga if it's possible, right? And mindfulness, right? And getting past the catastrophization cycle where they're like, oh, it's going to be bad, oh, it's going to be bad, oh, it's bad, instead of, and that's the part that irritates us as physical therapists, especially in larger companies where we have a front office manager who won't collect copay or coinsurance. Like, and I'm not the guy that talks about money. I'm just the guy that believes, like, as we talk about the integrity part, like if you come to me and you're cash pay, I'm going to tell you exactly what the cash price is.
Yeah.
And I'm going to collect from you every single visit so that you don't get $1,000 bill or $700 bill 2 months from now. Right. That's only going to piss you off. I believe that you should understand the complete cost of care. Like if you have met your deductible and I'm looking online and you're not going to be close, like I'll just tell you it's going to cost X. Now, if you want to make payments, that's fine, right? Like I want to get you better more than I want your money. Absolutely. I mean, I need the money too, but I believe in that. And the problem that we'll get with the larger companies is front office managers are a little bit afraid to collect, and then they don't, and and we do this psychology,
liked, right? Everybody
they want to be liked, right? And we do the psychology part on the back where like they come in crying about how they have to sleep in a recliner and they can't move, and so we're in their head telling them, yes, you can. Yeah, we're cheerleading them up for like 4 months, and then they get $1,000 bill, and they're pissed.
Yeah.
And then they want to give us a negative review, right? Because we live on that. Yeah. They want to give us a negative review, and it doesn't have anything to do with the services we offered.
Well, and there's like a value proposition, right? Like I go in, because like as on the patient side, I mean, I look at, I'll take my wife's dental as an example, just because that's top of mind and current. She's having this dental work done. And it's like, do we save the tooth? Do we lose the tooth? What do we do? And I'm like, it's a tooth, man. Like it's not a vital organ. It's not a thing. It's not like when she had her carotid artery dissection and we needed to like life-saving things. It's like it's so what's the value proposition, right? And when we were having the conversation, it's weird because we're emotional beings. And so it's like, well, it's my body part. And I'm like, but it's a tooth, right? And then there's this other piece where it's like, I asked, well, okay, so tell me what it costs. And I could get this like song and dance about, well, maybe they'll cover this or maybe it could be this. And I was like, look, forget that I have insurance. Just tell me, what does this procedure cost? Black and white. I'm not going to get mad at you. My feelings aren't going to be hurt. Tell me what it is, like transparency, and then we'll figure out who pays what parts and who does what. But at least I'll know. And I feel like it's just like this social construct we have of like we have to coddle everyone and we have to. And I've been accused recently of not having enough empathy, which is 100% true. And I think I have enough for me. Like I have what God gave me. He thought it was enough. So
I have enough I have what I need.
I have
Thanks.
what I need. Like I don't understand. Like if
Thanks. Yeah.
so like you may not be the PT for that. I'm not the empathy person for you. If you need more empathy, you need to go find someone else. But I think it's just like it's kind of like this through line of what we've been talking about all day is this idea that like we have to coddle and be liked and we don't want to say anything that's controversial because things that weren't controversial 5 years ago, 10 years ago, now are like ending marriages. And you know, it's like, man, if we could all just kind of take a deep breath and I think, you know, if anything, what I'm hearing you say is mindset is such a key player in that. And whether it's the pain, whether it's the business, whether it's, you know, parenting, you know, it's like how much are we present? Because we didn't even talk about like you've been married for like 100 years. You got, you know, this amazing wife and this thing with like how many of your friends do you know? I mean, maybe your circles are different than mine, but how many of your friends have like not had successful marriages? Their marriages have fallen apart or they've is that something
too many, which is why we started applying some of the NLP concepts to you know, to relationships for people. Like we tell them like we want you to grow together as business owners. We work with mostly business people, right, who are either in the same business or both in the business. I want you to grow together as, you know, to find common ground and goals, and we end up helping them grow together as people. But yeah, just too many. I mean, even you and I, like, you know, just on our experiences in doTERRA, we're seeing
left and right.
Yeah, too many couples that I love and that I looked up to are just.
And I see it being celebrated, which hurts, honestly. Like, and I don't mean to offend anyone. I am the last person to tell you that, like, because I mean, my wife had every reason on the planet to divorce me, and I know that she had met with attorneys, and I know she had papers drawn up, and that sucks. Like to look back on that, it's painful in some respects. At the same time, I also look at it and go, it's 1,000% a choice. Because when people ask her why she stayed with me, or when people ask us how we managed to stay together for 25 years, it literally comes down to because we decided that when we said till death do us part, we meant it. Like, and that's the thing that hurts me is I see marriages falling apart or crumbling, and I don't see very many of the like heartbreak that I would like. When Carrie and I almost got divorced, I was broken. Like the reason we stayed together is because I was like, I can't, this sucks. And I see celebrations and I see parties and I see, you know, I saw a post recently that said I'm the divorce is final and I'm the happiest woman alive. And it just that broke my heart. I don't even remember. I didn't even like read the comments, or I just scrolled by. It was just like, oh, and I don't know their situation, so I don't mean no judgment. I just from my angle, my point of view, my perspective, my own lenses and biases, it just breaks my heart. And I feel like conversations like this, the podcast that I do, the stuff that I share is really geared towards like taking responsibility, and if things go sideways and if things suck, at the very least recognize it and let's not celebrate it. Maybe, I don't know.
We have this exit strategy, and a lot of it comes from the, you do you, right? Oh, you do you. If it's just not working, it's fine. Like it's fine, right? And remember, there's actually a guy that I'm trying to think of the conversation, but the conversation was somebody was in a place that, they didn't, I don't know. I'm trying to remember how it works, but it's really about unhappy people want you to be unhappy with them. And so, like, if you're getting advice from your single friends and divorced friends about like what it's like to be single and divorced, you're never going to get great advice. But yeah, I mean, it's tell a story that Charlotte and I were doing when we were unpacking some of our crap, and I think I told you this one last time as well. But just like, I sort of grew up with loss, and my mom being married like 4 times, and I never dreamed of having kids because I didn't know what it was like to be in a family and be committed and do those types of things. And I never dreamed I'd find anybody as wonderful as Charlotte, right? And so I would always just make this joke, right? And this joke was like, people were like, "Hey, how you guys doing?" I'm like, every day I don't come home and my crap's, every day I come home, my crap's on the front porch is a great day for me, right?
Yeah.
And realizing later, after I cleared up some of my crap to some NLP stuff, right? My worry and fear of abandonment, which is really what it was, right? That she was just, eventually, it was a matter of time, she was going to leave me because I wasn't worth it, right? That's a lot to unpack, but that's really what it was. And I realized that I was doing my best, as you said you were, right? I was doing my best to sabotage my marriage. And so I call it death by 10,000 cuts. Like, how many more years, and we're coming up on 30, right? How many more years would she have put up with me just continuing to, because every time I said that, I hurt her feelings.
Yeah.
Right. Every time I said that, I hurt her feelings, because she's like, "Why would I leave you? Like, you're such a jackass for like,
It's like, I wasn't thinking about it, but if you keep it's trash.
I wasn't thinking about it. Thanks for telling me that I should throw your crap on the front porch."
Yeah.
So it was just like, I could just, in the back of her head, she's like, "You're such a dick." Like, what, and I'm like, "Oh, eventually you're gonna leave me." And then, a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? If she left me, then I'd been like, and there you go. Right there. See, told you you're going to leave, right? Told you you're going to leave me, and you left me. And so it's your fault, because I knew you were going to leave the whole time.
Right. You were stringing me along. Right? It's like, no.
Well, you get what you want, dummy.
Yeah. It's just,
it's integrity.
I think it is.
It means you have to be in integrity. You have to you got to be honest with your spouse. You have to be honest with them. You shouldn't, like, and you have to fall in love with them, and you got to keep falling in love with them. And you have to enjoy that. You have to enjoy the heck out of the journey. I look at Charlotte, and more important than me telling her that I love her and that she's beautiful, for me, is I tell her I love the journey with her. Like, I am so appreciative that she's taking this journey with me, like, because it's got bumpy ass road, and there's pits, and there's times we got to get out of the wagon and lift the damn wagon over the pit and do it again, right? I mean, there's just like, yeah.
I think it really is a choice. It really is just going, I'm going to choose in. And I think the other piece is that radical ownership you kind of mentioned, because I found through the course of our marriage, and I sort of like think of it in 2 parts, because on our 8th wedding anniversary, we renewed our vows. And that was really important to me, because I had not lived up to my end of the bargain. And I went to her and I said, "Hey, I know people do this on their 10th or their 15th or their 25th or whatever." I said, "But this anniversary, I want to renew our vows, and I'm asking you to marry me again." She kind of blew me off, and didn't think I was serious. And a couple weeks go by, and she's like, "Hey, seriously, like, what do you want to do for our anniversary?" And I was like, "I asked you to marry me again." You said no. Like, I don't know. I'm not really. And she was like, "Oh," she was like, "You were serious?" And I was like, "Yes. Like, I'm telling you that this is important to me." So I kind of look at our marriage in like 2 parts, right? There's like pre that and post that. And what's funny is there's times when I find myself not falling out in love with my wife. I'm madly in love with her, but there are times, like you said, there's pits, right? And there's times where you look at things and you go, "I'm not really digging the way everything's going right now." and rather than me looking at the ways that she isn't showing up, I have learned, and I think this is the key for us, is that I've learned to flip it to how am I not showing up? How am I not like, okay, she's not doing it. And a lot of this comes from Byron Katie and loving what is and doing the work, which are, she refers to as a turnaround. So like if I'm looking at my wife and I'm thinking, well, she's not, caring for me, or she's not compassionate, or she's not this, I flip that around to where am I not being compassionate? Where am I not loving on her? How am I not showing up? And I heard it recently described as a contest of submission, which I kind of liked. I haven't fully unpacked it, like how it plays out, but the idea is that like a husband and wife should be constantly competing for who is submitting to the other one more, like honoring and loving, and I kind of, there's pieces of that I'm like, that's kind of sticky. I don't know if I like that or not, but I think I that which resists persists, right? So when I feel resistance to it, I want to go, okay, why do I not like that? Why does that not feel good? Probably because my ego's in the way and I'm being selfish. But I think that really comes down to like that journey, right? And there's this new song that came out. Are you familiar with the band Johnny Swim? They're not super popular.
No.
Great band. They have a like reality show on the Magnolia Network. I've never seen it. But I follow them on Instagram, and they have a new song out called Devastated. And the story behind it is amazing. And I think you'll appreciate it. And essentially it's their kind of point is they want to love each other through all of it until it's devastating. And he talks about he watched his mom lose his dad, and his wife is the other part of the band. She watched her dad lose his mom, or their spouse. He said, and watching them love so hard for so long till they lost their spouse was like, that's the goal. It isn't, and like it was kind of dark, but it was like, damn, I get it. Like, and one of the lines in the song is ring on your finger, a tag on your toe. Like that's the goal. And I'm like, well, okay, it's a little dark, but like I want that. I want that full circle, beginning to end. And so like for me, I look at it and I go, okay, once you define what you want, it gets real simple. Then you just make choices that align with that. That's the hard part, right? The deciding is easy. It's making all the rest of the choices that align with that.
Yeah, and it's really important to be, to have a thing called values alignment, right? You and your spouse and your business and we do this values alignment, and that's number one reason I think we talk about. I don't know if I told you, like we do an annual retreat just for Charlotte and I, right? For Snow Incorporated. What are we going to do for our family this year? Like, and usually in January, sometime we used to pair it with the incentive trip that used to be mid-January, but that keeps getting kicked down the road. Yeah. COVID and a couple of reasons, but and we take some time and align our values, right? Like, what is it that's important to me, like in the context of our relationship? What is this important to me? And this is how the question goes, right? What's important to me in the context of intimacy? What's important to me in the context of work? What's important to me in the context of, of how these things come together? And you take all these things and you sort of break it down into your top. You just keep writing. The list is usually like 10 or 20 long, and then you make sure that at least the top 5 things that are important to you are the same with your partner. And it's a big deal when we come down to sort of the business side of things, when you and your partner are building a business together, to align your values in those 2 categories, because I'm telling you, sometimes you're dramatically different. We worked with a couple and we actually had them align their values, and she was, what did she say? She wanted like, and this was in the context of their relationship. I'm trying to remember what it was she said. She said, like faith, like one of her faith was in her top 5, and it wasn't in his top 5. And so there's a technique you can do, just trying to move that around. But attraction and sex, like, weren't in her top 5. They weren't his. He's a guy, right? right? And so he did a little bit of work, and then she did a little bit of work, and you know, and it's funny after we had anyway, there's a thing that goes with it that is a whole longer conversation. But as they aligned their values, like her business took off, his business is taking off. They have independent businesses. Her business is taking off like crazy. His business is taking off like crazy. And and as far as this intimacy part, right, that she needed to move, and then he had already there, like their faith has increased as they go together. And, if they're not careful, they could have more kids because they're busy.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
so, and when you align those values, and it's subtle, like it is subtle, like as you just, we always say we grow apart. We don't really grow apart. We just develop interests, right? Like, oh, she's busy over here. She's got a call. She's got a Zoom call. I'll just start doing this. Right. And then, it's just subtle how these things just sort of move around, right? Things that are important to you. Like we're still, what's the kids, and it's all this, but to be able to align those things is crucial. And what you want to do with the kids, what you want to do with your relationship, what you want to do with your businesses, and all those things, because this is a partnership, right? This is a partnership that we're doing, right? You and Carrie have a partnership in your business in the McCoy household.
Yeah.
And then you have another business, right? And then, another business as well. And it becomes easier when we're all aligned in the same thing. Like Charlotte and I get aligned on our values, and she's like, I got a 3-day thing. I'm like, I got the kids, go.
Yeah.
Right. And no longer is there anything else, because we've aligned things so that we have the same goal.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's important. I think people get hung up on, because, Carrie and I work through sort of what we kind of call it is, what does winning look like? And what does it look like in terms of our marriage, in terms of our children, in terms of our business. And it's very similar. I think maybe offline we have another conversation about aligning values, because I'm really fascinated by that. Because Carrie and I, a lot of times, she gets really hung up on language and on words. She's grew up in an NLP practitioner household, so she oftentimes will overthink, and this is my perception. So if she's listening, which luckily she doesn't, I'm not throwing her under the bus, but like she'll tend to get wrapped up in like the definitions and the meanings of words, and almost to like a paralysis of analysis situation. And I'm a little bit more broad in like defining the core values, right? It's this thing, that thing, this thing. And it's been super helpful for me, because we did this exercise 2 or 3 years ago at a seminar I was at, and I came home and completely changed the way I parented, because I realized that the way I was parenting was not in alignment with my core value. And like, as an example, so like for me, freedom is a core value. And I was micromanaging my kids. I need you to go clean the kitchen. And then I would nitpick every little thing, or how, like, no, the sponge has to be used on this, and you fold the washcloth in the square, and it was like, wait a minute, if my core value is freedom, then I shouldn't be micromanaging how they use a tool or a thing. If the end result is what the agreed upon result should be, then the rest of it should be up to them to decide. And if they do it in an inefficient way, that's them. They'll learn that on their own, that they could do it in 5 minutes and not 40. And so I think that's a really great thing that you kind of bring up, is that aligning of values for couples. But I'm curious, when they're not in alignment, how do you move them up? Is that a contest of submission? Is that a compromising thing where it's like, well, I want more sex, and I want more coffee?
No, it's not as much. It's a lot easier than you think. And it's really just about saying, internally, because these are just things that you take internally. Like, what do I like first? Well, I like Diet Mountain Dew first, right? And I like Diet Coke second. Like, and you just say, like, I'm just going to have a discussion, right? And part of that is it comes at the tail end of a little bit of NLP work. And then you'll just visualize realigning your values, and then check in to see if they're important with you. It happens. I'm looking at Cheryl, I was just going past. I'm like, I ought to have her explain it, but it's not a contest of submission. It's funny. You can say, oh, I just think I want to make that more important. And I've had Charlotte do some work with me on health and fitness. It's like, look, I need health and fitness to be a little bit more important to me. And then we'll do some visualization and it's surprising how well it works. Like I'm the guy that's like, well, it shouldn't work, but it does.
Yeah.
But to your point about freedom and micromanaging, because I wanted to get back to that. There's a concept that I do when I'm coaching businesses, and it's usually if you have a business owner, right, who's telling you they want you to finish a task, but they actually don't give you steps to finish this task, like the sponge goes here or whatever.
Yeah,
because they're big on freedom and letting you work on your choice and you learn. And even in my own business, I always say hurry up and make mistakes, because that's how you learn. Like I want you to screw stuff up. Like I want you to forget to write down a phone number and like crap. And I'm like, now you have to call them back.
Yep.
You won't do that again.
You won't do it again. Exactly.
You won't do it again, and you learn these things. But so for me, I like to present the picture of the thing is, what does done look like? Like you always say, let's talk about wins. And so for me, for tasks, and I had to get good at this in my last company because the boss was great. Like, hey, I want you to blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, that's great. So what does done look like?
Yeah.
Right. Done looks like this. And it's really task driven for even my staff. Like I'll clean the whole clinic and I'll have them come in the morning. I'm like, so look at this, walk around, trash cans are empty, bathrooms this, very process oriented, right?
Yeah.
This is what clean looks like.
Yeah. This is the expectation.
Everybody have this image. They're like, yeah. I'm like, great. Now, when I say clean, we already know.
Yeah, we know what the expectation. Yeah, that's. I think Brene Brown.
Yeah.
I think Brene Brown dives into that in her book Dare to Lead. She talks a little bit about, the communication side of that and what does done.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Because it's important, and clarity is just such a good thing, right? So I mean, and I do that with our kids, because I don't have an office to run. My office is my house. And we'll run them through. Okay, when I say go do X, this is what the end result should be. And if that takes you 4 hours or 4 minutes, cool. If you want it to take you 4 minutes, I'll show you how I do it, because that's how long it'll take me. If you want to do it a different way, I'm going to let you do it that way. And where I used to just and we're big fans on choice theory and this is what it looks like. And this is what, why you want to choose in for that. And this is why it's important. We spend a lot of time helping them understand. I need context. I'm good with there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat. I just want to know why you chose that one. No judgment. I'm just curious. Help me understand, because I'm always looking for how can I get better? So if you do it a different way, I want to know, what am I missing? What am I? And I may watch it and go, yeah, well, that's dumb. I don't like that. I'm going to do it this way, but it's the concept of giving them the choices and helping them understand that our actions have consequences. You can do it this way and you can have it done, or you can do it that way. And I think, it's funny because we also have to in the context of marriage, unpack certain things, because my mom, my stepmom treated me in a certain way that I really didn't care for. And at times my wife will, display characteristics that are maybe similar, or I'm seeing them as similar, but her intention is completely different and it's not the same. And I'm the same way with her dad. She'll see me do things and it'll trigger something. And I'm like, whoa, time out. It's the communication is the other really big piece, where we can give each other space and go, okay, that's not what I meant. That's not what I said, but you certainly felt it a certain way. So help me understand. So I'm wondering if you would, because we're getting to a point where I think it's probably a good spot to wrap up, but we've mentioned NLP a few times, and I think a lot of people don't have any clue what we're talking about. I'm wondering if you would expand just a hair on what NLP is and how it sort of helped the communication in your house, in your marriage, in your business, and all the different things.
Awesome. So NLP stands for neuro linguistic programming, and oftentimes people have seen it as a sales technique and other things, but really it's a technique of just sort of rapidly accessing sometimes 5 or 6 core emotions: fear, anger, sadness, self-doubt, and a few other things, right? And going and just finding those opportunities, because every I'm looking for something because I'm a visual guy, right? Every experience that we have, and even one where you said Carrie will do something that's similar to your stepmom, right? So we've made a decision in our life to treat every event one way, right? And oftentimes when it happens the same way, like my fear of abandonment, right? So I had, right, girlfriends. I was engaged once, called it off. And my mom, always leaving with another guy. Like I had this abandonment that I just never really knew about, right? And this is back in my timeline. And so in my head, every time somebody displays anything, like Charlotte would go on a trip, I'm like, yep, she's gonna be gone. Right. And I would be super jealous, and she'd come back and I'm acting like a jackass and all this stuff. And it's all because early in my life, I made a decision, right, that she was going to leave me.
Yeah.
Right. And until I clear that up, everything is colored by that decision and or reinforced. Right. Like early, when I was a kid, my mom getting married, divorced, all that stuff, like they're gonna leave. Right. And then, have a long-term girlfriend, she leaves me, get engaged, she calls it off, right? Like, yep. So I'm reinforcing that decision, which was here, not here, right? But now I'm just carrying forward and I keep reinforcing the same decisions. And these things are like fear, hurt, sadness, anger, grief, like all those things, right? Like, why should I be overly sad? And an example is I had a friend who lost his parents, and he's older when he lost his parents, but he was the last kid, and he'd still just like every year on the anniversary of when his dad died, he'd just like be a mess. And we're just like, what, there's sadness and then there's unwarranted sadness. And why do you have that? Right. And his was part of some abandonment issues that he had as well. Like we went back and unpacked the abandonment, learned from it, and then let it go. And the simple question is, you ask your subconscious mind or unconscious mind, like, is it okay that I can learn from this? And then I can let it go. I can learn what I need to learn, bring forward and forget about it. Like I don't have to do that. And I tell you, I will literally tell you just the difference that it made. Just the abandonment side on Charlotte and I, we always thought she was going to leave me. Always thought I needed to look better, be better, lose weight, all that stuff, right? And like the minute I unpack the abandonment and let it go, she's going on a trip. I'm like, good luck. Love you. See you when you're back. Right. No longer concerned. Like, she'd leave, forget her wedding ring. I'm like, I don't care.
Yeah.
Right. And you changes your whole perspective on the things that you want. Now, do we want to get into the point where we're like, I don't care what my wife does? No, I do. But no longer am I burdened by this whole thing, this overriding cloud of abandonment or anger or sadness or trauma and all these things. And it's not really for trauma people, right? I mean, that's not what it's for, but it's to help people unpack things. And we do stuff with network marketing as well, where like they have a money block that's somewhere, right? Grandma said money was the root of all evil.
Yep.
And look at those rich people. They're always stepping on people. And I got fired by an owner, right? Grandpa got fired, or dad got fired, and he got fired by the boss, who's this greedy bastard, because he was trying to cut wages, and he may or may not have been, but it doesn't mean that having money makes you a bad person, right? And so we have this whole situation. And so oftentimes and most often, the biggest change can happen when you just go back and we clear up fear, anger, sadness, grief, right?
Yeah.
And you just unpack those, get past them, and then you have now you're experiencing life a completely different way without all these preconceived notions about what that means.
Yeah.
What does
I
it
wonder
mean?
why we attach so easily to negative emotions. Why do we not why do we not attach to joy, ecstasy, love, happiness? Like
we don't clear joy, ecstasy, happiness, cheer. No, it's always fear, anger, sadness,
Yeah, that's crazy.
But those are the driving emotions that can just change a lot of stuff. And so there's a whole lot more that goes to that. But so we do it with couples, we do it with individuals. It's interesting, right? I mean, so when we do couples, I'm the one dealing with the guys, clearly, right? But it's and part of it is just like finding a way to forgive, finding a way to move on, finding a way to make it better. And working with people who again, right, maybe they've been divorced and they're just like, I just need to figure out what I'm doing better. I don't understand, right? And clear up all of this stuff. Like, I can never trust men again. Well, why? Because you made a decision, right? Everything that we
that's
do
how
now,
you framed it.
Yeah, everything we do now is based on the decision that we made before.
Yeah.
Right. Like everything. Even this whole conversation, me looking at like my hair, going like it's too thin, right? One of my friends probably said, "Dude, you're losing your hair." Right. And like, so now I'm like, okay, right. Because it looked good. That's a decision that's based on some other decision that I made based on a comment that I internalized, and now it's permanent. I don't know.
Yeah. I love it, man. I love it. I appreciate your time. You're an amazing human being. You guys are an inspiration. I love what you and Charlotte have created, and that you share it with everybody, and that you took some time to talk and ask questions.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, let's figure it out.
All the stuff. It's good times. Um, yeah, I dig it, man. Let's do it
All
again.
right. Well,
And
remember, go out and remain curious.